I need you to sit down for this one, because what I am about to say is not going to feel gentle, and it is not meant to. This is not a soft message wrapped in comfortable language to make you feel good for the next 30 minutes and then forget about it by morning. This is a warning, not a threat, a warning. The kind a parent gives a child they love enough to be honest with instead of silent. You have been given signs. Not one, not two, many. Repeated, patient, deliberate signs spread across months, maybe years, each one softer than the last resort, but each one clear enough that on some level you already knew exactly what was being asked of you. And tonight, heaven is not sending another sign. Tonight, heaven is telling you plainly that the season of gentle nudging is closing. And if you keep walking past what you have already been shown, the door you have been standing in front of will not stay open forever. Think back honestly, not defensively, just honestly, to the moments you brushed past without stopping. The dream that felt too vivid to be random, the one you woke up from with your heart racing, the one you told yourself was just stress and never mentioned to anyone. The number you kept seeing everywhere, on receipts, on clocks, on license plates, appearing so often it stopped feeling like coincidence and started feeling like it was trying to get your attention, and still, you scrolled past it. The friend who said something so specific, so unprompted, so unrelated to anything they could have known, that it stopped you cold for a second before you talked yourself out of taking it seriously. The restlessness that shows up at exactly the same time every night. The unexplainable heaviness that settles over you the moment you try to keep living the way you have been living, as if your own spirit is trying to physically stop you from continuing down a path it knows does not lead anywhere good. You have felt all of it. You have dismissed all of it. And tonight, none of that dismissal is being held against you as punishment, but it is being named because the naming is the only thing that can wake you up before the window closes completely. Here is what most people never understand about signs, and it is exactly why so many of them get ignored. Signs are rarely dramatic the first time. They are quiet, easy to explain away, easy to attribute to coincidence, stress, imagination, too much caffeine, not enough sleep. That is by design. Heaven does not want to terrify you into obedience. Heaven wants you to choose it freely. So the first sign is always gentle enough to be missed without consequence. But signs repeat. And every time a sign repeats without being answered, it grows slightly less gentle, slightly harder to explain away, slightly more urgent in tone, because the gentleness was never meant to be permanent. It was meant to be an invitation. And invitations that keep being declined eventually stop being extended the same way. I want to ask you something directly, and I want you to actually answer it instead of letting the question float past you the way you have let everything else float past you. How many times has the same warning shown up in your life in a different costume? A relationship you knew was wrong for you long before it collapsed, but you stayed because leaving felt harder than staying. A job or a path you knew in your gut was not what you were built for, but you kept showing up because change felt riskier than staying stuck. A habit you knew was quietly costing you your peace, your health, your relationships, but you kept telling yourself you would deal with it later. Once things calmed down, once this season passed, once you had more time. Chosen one, later has already cost you more than you are willing to admit tonight. And heaven is not asking you to feel guilty about the delay. Heaven is asking you to stop delaying starting right now, in this exact moment, before another season slips by disguised as more time when it was actually one more chance quietly closing. Signs do not only show up in dreams and numbers, they show up in your body, in your relationships, in your finances, in the quiet exhaustion that follows you from room to room, even after a full night of sleep. Think about the physical warnings you have been explaining away as ordinary stress, the tension that lives permanently in your shoulders, the sleep that never quite feels restful, the way your body seems to protest the moment you try to keep pushing forward on the same path you have been walking. Your body has been trying to get your attention just as much as your dreams have, and you have been treating both the same way, as background noise to be managed instead of messages to be heard. Think about the financial warnings, the way certain doors keep closing no matter how hard you push against them, the way money seems to slip through your hands the moment it arrives, as if something is trying to tell you that the current path is not sustainable, that a different direction is required before provision can flow the way it was designed to. Think about the relational warnings, the same conflict resurfacing in different relationships with different people. A pattern so consistent it can no longer be blamed entirely on the other person. A pattern that keeps pointing back to something in you that has been avoiding a necessary confrontation with itself. There are different kinds of people who ignore signs, and I want you to recognize which one you have been, because naming it honestly is part of what breaks the pattern tonight. There's the busy one, who fills every waking hour so completely that there is never a quiet moment left for a sign to actually land, who mistakes constant motion for productivity when it is often simply a sophisticated way of avoiding stillness long enough to hear anything uncomfortable. There is the doubter, who hears the sign clearly, but immediately builds a case against it, who has spent years training their mind to explain away anything that might require a change they are not ready to make. There is the people pleaser, who senses exactly what needs to shift but delays acting because acting would disappoint someone whose approval feels more urgent in the moment than their own obedience. And there is the exhausted one, who has heard so many signs for so long that they have gone numb to all of them, who no longer has the energy to respond to one more nudge because responding to the first 100 never seemed to change anything. Wherever you see yourself in that list, that recognition is not an accusation. It is the first honest mirror you have looked into in a long time. And honest mirrors are usually where real change actually begins. If what I am describing feels uncomfortably specific, if you can already picture the exact sign you have been avoiding as clearly as if I had said your name, comment the word "warned" right now before you keep listening, because admitting it out loud, even in a comment box, is the first act of the obedience you have been avoiding. Like this message so it reaches someone else who has been running from the same conversation you have been running from. And do not turn this off yet, because what comes next is the part that explains exactly why this urgency is real and not manufactured for effect. Heaven's patience is not the same thing as heaven's permission. This is the distinction that gets confused more than almost any other spiritual truth, and it is the exact confusion that has kept you comfortable in your delay for far too long. Just because consequences have not visibly caught up with you yet does not mean the path you are on has been quietly approved. Grace gives you time. Grace does not give you forever. There is a difference between mercy that is patient and mercy that has no boundaries at all. And if you have spent years assuming that because nothing catastrophic has happened yet, nothing catastrophic is coming, I need you to hear this clearly. The absence of consequence is not the same as the absence of a deadline. Every warning you have received had a shelf life. Some of those shelf lives have already quietly expired without your realizing it. Others are closing right now, in this exact season, which is precisely why this message found you tonight and not 5 years from now, when it might have been too late for it to matter. I know this is heavy. I know the temptation right now is to tell yourself this message does not apply to you specifically, that it is too general, too broad, that surely your situation is different. That exact thought, the urge to minimize what you are hearing, is itself one of the signs you have been ignoring. The enemy of your obedience does not usually argue with truth directly. He simply convinces you that the truth, while real, does not apply to your particular circumstances. That is how people walk right past their own turning point while nodding along in agreement with every word being said, convinced the whole time that someone else needed to hear it more than they did. Let me walk you through what it actually looks like when someone finally stops ignoring the signs, because the alternative to delay is not instant perfection, and I do not want you to think this requires you to have everything figured out tonight. It does not. What it requires is a single decision, made honestly, made now, to stop pretending you have not been shown what you have already been shown. That decision does not need an audience. It does not need a dramatic before and after. It simply needs to be real, and it needs to happen before you close this video and let the noise of your day swallow the clarity you are feeling in this exact moment. Here is the part that will either be the hardest thing you hear tonight or the most liberating, depending on how you receive it. God is not angry with you. This is not a message about wrath waiting to fall on your head the moment you make one more mistake. This is a message about a father who has been extraordinarily patient with a child who keeps wandering toward the edge of a cliff while insisting they can see clearly enough not to fall. The urgency in this message is not the urgency of punishment. It is the urgency of love running out of gentle ways to get your attention before the situation requires something far less gentle to wake you up. Every parent understands this tension. You can warn a child softly for a long time, but eventually, if the warnings keep being ignored, love requires a firmer voice, not because love has changed, but because the stakes of continued silence have grown too high to stay quiet any longer. I also want to protect you from misunderstanding this urgency as something it is not, because there is a counterfeit version of this message that exists too, the version that uses fear to manipulate rather than truth to awaken, and I do not want you leaving this video anxious instead of alert. Real urgency from heaven always comes paired with a clear, specific, actionable next step. It never leaves you paralyzed with vague dread and nowhere to direct it. If what you are feeling right now is simply panic with no direction, that is not what this message is trying to produce. But if what you are feeling is a sharpened clarity about one specific thing you already know you have been avoiding, that clarity is the real thing, and it deserves your full attention rather than your anxiety. The goal tonight is not to frighten you into obedience. The goal is to finally make the choice easy to see, after years of it being easy to ignore. This is where I need to pull you into a hard turning point, because if you are starting to feel your attention drift, if some part of you wants to reach for your phone or convince yourself you already got the point and can stop listening now, that urge itself is worth paying attention to. Distraction at the exact moment truth gets specific is rarely random. It is often resistance disguised as boredom. Stay with me for a few more minutes, because what comes next is the part that determines whether tonight becomes the night everything shifted or just another night you almost listened. I want to give you a picture of how this typically unfolds, not to frighten you, but because seeing the pattern clearly is often what finally breaks it. Picture someone who received their first sign years ago, a quiet unease about a direction they were heading, easy enough to dismiss at the time because nothing bad had happened yet. They kept going. A second sign arrived, slightly louder, a specific warning from someone they trusted, still easy enough to rationalize away because the warning came wrapped in someone else's opinion rather than undeniable proof. They kept going. A third sign arrived, this time costing them something, a relationship strained, an opportunity lost, a health scare that should have been a wake-up call but instead became just another crisis to survive and move past without reflection. Still, they kept going, because stopping to actually examine the pattern felt more frightening than simply continuing to push through it. This is not a hypothetical stranger. This is the story of countless people who are exactly where you are right now, standing at the exact point where the pattern either finally breaks or continues escalating into something far more costly than a wasted evening or an uncomfortable conversation. Here is the encouraging part hidden inside that picture, though. Every person in that story had a moment, usually more than one, where the pattern could have broken earlier if they had simply stopped and responded instead of continuing forward on autopilot. You are being given that exact moment right now, tonight, in a form gentle enough to still be received as an invitation rather than forced correction. This is not the fifth sign arriving after everything has already collapsed. This may still be an early enough sign that responding tonight costs you far less than continuing to delay would eventually cost you. That is not a small mercy. That is the entire point of everything being said in this message. I want to tell you what tends to happen to people who keep ignoring signs long after this exact point in their story, because understanding the pattern is part of what breaks it. The signs do not simply stop, they intensify. What used to be a subtle dream becomes a recurring nightmare. What used to be a quiet unease becomes a physical exhaustion that no amount of sleep seems to fix. What used to be gentle redirection becomes forced redirection. Doors slamming instead of doors quietly closing, relationships collapsing instead of quietly fading, opportunities disappearing instead of simply not arriving. This is not cruelty. This is the natural escalation of a warning that keeps being ignored. The same way a smoke alarm gets louder, the longer smoke continues filling a room. The alarm was never the danger. The alarm was the mercy, trying to wake you before the danger became unavoidable. I also need to address the specific excuse that has probably kept you stuck longer than any other. The idea that you will respond once your circumstances change, once you have more time, more stability, more clarity, more permission from the people around you. Chosen one, that day does not exist. There will never be a version of your life so free of complication that obedience suddenly becomes easy. The perfect moment you are waiting for is not coming, because it was never meant to. Every person who has ever answered a warning answered it in the middle of an imperfect, complicated, inconvenient season, not after they solved every other problem first. Waiting for ideal conditions is not caution. It is a sophisticated form of avoidance that feels responsible while quietly costing you everything the warning was trying to protect. I want to address one more doubt before we move forward, because I know it is sitting somewhere in the back of your mind right now, even if you have not fully admitted it. The doubt that says, what if I respond and nothing changes? What if I finally have the conversation, make the decision, take the step, and life simply continues the way it always has? Chosen one. Obedience was never a guarantee that everything becomes easy the moment you comply. It is a guarantee that you are no longer standing in the way of what heaven wants to do in your life. Sometimes the change is immediate and undeniable. Sometimes the change is quiet and gradual. So gradual you only recognize it in hindsight, months later, when you realize the heaviness that used to follow you everywhere has simply stopped showing up. Either way, the obedience itself is never wasted, even when the results are not instant. Because the alternative, continuing to ignore what you already know, has never once produced the peace you have been quietly hoping delay would somehow deliver. If you are still here, if these words have not been easy to sit with but you have not looked away either, comment the word ready right now, because that word means something different tonight than it might have meant a week ago. It means you are done waiting for the perfect moment and choosing this moment instead, imperfect as it is. Subscribe, because there is more direction coming for exactly the season you are standing in, and you do not want to miss the next piece of clarity heaven has prepared for you. Share this with someone you know has been circling the same decision for far too long, because sometimes the thing that finally breaks a person's paralysis is hearing that someone else sees exactly what they have been trying to ignore. I want to be practical with you for a moment, because conviction without a concrete next step tends to fade by morning, and I do not want that to happen to you tonight. Before you close this video, I want you to do 3 specific things. First, name the sign, out loud or in writing, the exact one that surfaced in your mind earlier in this message. Do not keep it vague. Vague convictions are the easiest ones to talk yourself out of by tomorrow afternoon. Second, identify the smallest possible action you can take in the next 24 hours that moves you toward obedience instead of away from it. Not the entire solution, just the first honest step. The phone call, the message, the appointment, the boundary, the prayer you have been avoiding saying out loud. Third, tell one trusted person what you have decided, because decisions spoken only in private are far easier to quietly abandon than decisions that now have a witness holding you accountable to them. These 3 steps are simple, but simple is not the same as easy. And the difference between people who actually change and people who simply feel moved for an evening is almost always found in whether they took these exact kinds of concrete steps immediately or waited for a feeling that never returned with the same intensity. I also want to prepare you for something that tends to happen the moment you decide to finally respond to a sign you have ignored for a long time. Resistance often increases right before breakthrough, not because you made the wrong decision, but because you made the right one. The excuses that felt weak while you were only considering change will suddenly feel much more convincing the moment you actually try to act on it. The fear that felt manageable in theory will feel sharper in practice. This is not a sign that you misheard heaven. This is simply the natural friction that accompanies any real change, and expecting it in advance will keep it from derailing you the moment it shows up tomorrow morning, when the emotional intensity of tonight has already started to fade. Now I want to shift the tone here, because everything so far has been about urgency. But urgency without hope is just fear. And fear was never the point of this message. The point is this: it is not too late. Read that again if you need to. It is not too late. The fact that you are still hearing this message, still capable of feeling the weight of it, still able to recognize the specific signs I described earlier, is proof that the door has not closed yet. A door that has already closed does not still make you feel this uncomfortable. Discomfort like this is not evidence of judgment. It is evidence of an invitation still standing open, waiting for you to finally walk through it instead of admiring it from a safe, comfortable distance one more time. Here is what walking through it actually looks like, practically, starting tonight. It looks like finally having the conversation you have been avoiding, the one where you say the hard thing out loud instead of rehearsing it silently for the 100th time. It looks like ending the thing you already know is not right for you, instead of waiting for it to end itself so you never have to take responsibility for the decision. It looks like beginning the thing you have talked yourself out of for years: the calling, the change, the return to faith, the apology, the boundary, the leap. Whatever specific actions surfaced in your mind the moment I described the signs earlier in this message, you already know what it is. You knew before I said a single word tonight. This message did not tell you anything new. It simply gave you permission to stop pretending you did not already know. I want to speak directly to the fear underneath all of this, because fear is usually the real reason signs get ignored for so long. Not laziness, not distraction, fear. Fear that obedience will cost you something you are not ready to lose. Fear that the people around you will not understand the change. Fear that you will try and fail and prove to yourself that you never had what it takes in the first place. That fear is real, and no one is asking you to pretend it does not exist. But fear was never meant to be the thing that makes your decisions for you. Fear is a passenger, not a driver, and tonight is the night to finally take the wheel back from something that was never qualified to be steering your life in the first place. This is where the message needs to shift, because it is time to move from warning into decision. Say this with me, out loud if you can, quietly if you must, but mean it as you say it. I acknowledge the signs I have been ignoring, and I stop pretending I did not see them. I release the excuses I have been hiding behind, the timing, the fear, the waiting for perfect conditions that were never going to arrive. I choose obedience today, not because I have it all figured out, but because I refuse to let one more season pass disguised as more time. I release the fear that has been driving my decisions, and I take back the responsibility that was always mine to carry. I am not too far gone, and I am not too late. I am exactly where I need to be to finally respond to what has been waiting for my response all along. Now let's bring this before heaven directly, because some decisions are only fully sealed in prayer. Father, I confess that I have seen the signs and walked past them more times than I want to admit tonight. I confess that comfort has often mattered more to me than obedience, and delay has felt safer than the change I knew you were asking of me. Forgive me for the seasons I let slip by while telling myself I would respond later. Thank you for not giving up on me even when I gave you every reason to. Thank you for sending sign after sign with a patience I did not deserve and rarely appreciated in the moment. Give me the courage tonight to finally do what I have known I needed to do for far too long. Strip away the fear that has been disguising itself as caution. Strip away the excuses that have been disguising themselves as wisdom. Give me clarity for the exact next step, whether that is a conversation, a decision, an ending, or a beginning, and give me the strength to take that step before this feeling fades and the noise of tomorrow tries to convince me I imagined all of this. Protect me from wasting the urgency of this moment. I know how easily conviction fades once the video ends and life resumes its normal pace, so I ask you to keep this feeling alive in me long enough to actually act on it, not just admire it. Help me become someone who responds to your voice the first time instead of the 5th or the 50th. Rebuild in me a sensitivity to your signs, so subtle nudges do not need to escalate into painful ones before I finally listen. And for every season I delayed, redeem it. Do not let the years I spent ignoring what you were showing me be wasted years. Use even my slowness to teach me something my obedience alone never could have taught me. Seal this decision in me tonight. Let it not be a passing emotion that fades by morning, but a real, lasting shift that changes how I move forward from this point on. Let today mark the last day I pretended not to see what you have been showing me. Let it mark the first day I finally chose to walk through the door instead of standing in front of it. It is decided. It is chosen. It is done. In Jesus' name, amen. If this message reached you the way it was meant to reach you tonight, do not let the moment pass in silence the way you have let so many other moments pass. Comment the word chosen if you are done ignoring what you have already been shown. Comment the word ready if tonight is the night everything finally shifts for you. Like this message, so it finds someone else who has been circling the same decision you have been circling for far too long. Subscribe, because there is more direction coming for exactly the season you are standing in, and the next message may be the exact confirmation you need for the step you are about to take. Share this with the one person you know has been ignoring the same signs you almost kept ignoring tonight. The warning has been given. The door is still open. But it will not stay open forever, and what you do in the next few minutes matters more than you realize.